The
Dominic King Show on BBC Radio Kent.
He's got his own fashion label. He's fast becoming a recognised UK fashion designer. He's still at school in Sevenoaks. He's 13-year-old Joshua Bartfeld Birchjones. He's been designing ever since he was, well, about 3 or 4, we think. Enough to hold a pencil and doodle. Inspiration coming from his mum, Joanna's wardrobe. Josh, welcome to BBC Radio Kent.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Good day at school?
Boring.
Oh, is it? What do you have, maths?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Maths is not... I'm always told whenever I say this, because I was not good at maths at school, that it is a really good subject. It really can work out well for you. And I guess in designing, there is some maths in that. We'll talk about that on the way. But first, shall we a little whirlwind tour of what's been happening with you? Publicity terms over the last week or so, it's been incredible. It all started, of course, with BBC Minute. Have a listen to this.
Hey, I'm Josh. I'm a 13-year-old fashion designer. My biggest ambition is to be as big as Alexander McQueen, Chanel. I've always been interested in fashion pretty much since the age of 4. My mum's wardrobe is where it all started. I was kind of always really interested in all the textures, the fabrics, and I'd just take them out and I just sketch them. So I'm working on my collection. It's pretty top secret, but it's going to be the world's most expensive dress by a 13-year-old. My biggest highlight was my big show during London Fashion Week, and I had a standing ovation. It's really scary because there's like lights, there's people looking at you. So sometimes it can be hard to kind of juggle school life and being a fashion designer. Homework's so long, you can't let your school grades fail. I am up against a lot of adult designers and it's very competitive. Some people were like, wow, this is amazing. And then of course you get like this kind of people who are like, oh, he's 13, why is he doing this? So I'm kind of showing them how to do it, really.
Josh, since then you've been seen on BBC and Newsround for CBBC, BBC Breakfast. I watched you on the weekend on the sofa in Manchester there. And just yesterday I hear from Mum, Dutch TV as well. I mean, it's heady heights going on here. How are you?
It's just a bit overwhelming, really.
Yeah, I imagine it is overwhelming. Just take us through, though, from your perspective. Take us right back to the very beginning, because I mentioned about 3 or 4 years of age. Did you just know that was something you wanted to do, that you were creative and wanted to be able to keep drawing?
Yeah, it was just really like a big ambition of mine. I really loved it. And yeah, I just kind of got into it from there. And then, of course, it led on to me doing shows during Fashion Week. And
how does that work? Because, you know, there'll be many youngsters who start off with that kind of creative flair, which clearly you have, but then to take it to that next level, there was a kind of charity fashion show that you did. Was that the one at Port Lim?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, we raised $6,500 for that show.
Amazing. So that's where it kind of started for you at the fashion show there.
Yeah.
Was that something that from that moment you thought, right, this is what I really want to do?
Yeah, it was just kind of like, now I've done that, I kind of felt like I could take it further, really.
So give us a little insight into, as a fashion designer, what you do, how you see clothes, what's your motivation when you're creating?
I don't really know, really. Like, of course, because I do all like the sketching side of it, really. So I just kind of sit down, sketch and sketch and sketch, really, and then we take it to the seamstresses and we just kind of tell them what we need. And I just love seeing like the whole process from it, like the sketch to the actual piece, really.
Mum's wardrobe was the inspiration to start with, though, wasn't it? It was looking into that and seeing those clothes. Did you look at the clothes and think you liked the shape, the way they looked? How did that come to you?
Yeah, just kind of all of that stuff, really. Like, I think fabrics was a main one for me that really interested me.
Mum Joanna is with us here as well. I mean, first of all, you must be incredibly proud of what your son is already achieving.
I am, but a bit like Josh, I'm overwhelmed with what's actually happened, but he's worked so hard to get where he's got to today. As Josh mentioned, from the very first Port Lim show back in 2017 to then us being introduced to House of Icons, and Josh obviously doing 2 totally separate shows. In 2018, one, the capsule collection, and then in September, his evening wear collection, to what's actually coming up now, and the response and feedback from everyone's just been incredible.
I think what was really interesting to me, Josh, is that sometimes in this media world of ours, people latch on to the idea of, it's a teenager doing something that's really interesting. You're not a child anymore. You're going to that teenage years. You're kind of in that mixture period, and people kind of think, that's it's fascinating what you're doing, and it starts off as a bit of a gimmick. The reality is, anyone who's seen your stuff knows there's no gimmick there. You've got talent. And the fashion industry are seeing that. That must be really quite something.
Yeah, it is quite, I don't know, just amazing to kind of be recognised by a lot of people, and especially because, I am as young as I am, really. It's phenomenal, really. Do
you know in your mind what you want to do with this? It's early days, I guess, because you're starting out in this world, in this fashion world. But we heard the quite brilliant claims about I want to go and take hold of the fashion house. I want to do that. But what in your mind would you like to do?
Literally, like I said, I just want to make it as big as every other major designer all around the world. That is my plan, really. And to kind of show in all shows around the world during Fashion Week and have stores and everything. That is my goal, really.
And do you have in your mind, it's women's fashion at the moment, are you thinking of branching to men's fashion?
Yeah, once I'm kind of all set up and everything, I definitely would be interested in kind of branching out to other things like menswear, children's wear, all kinds of things like that, really.
I mean, it's a fascinating world as well, isn't it, the fashion world? Because it's so huge, but also to make a name for yourself, to make a splash, you have to have something about you that clearly is there. And there are many fashion designers who will launch their collections and we never hear from them again. The whirlwind of publicity surrounding what you're doing gives us a real sense that there's such a future that you're mapping out for yourself. But you're brilliantly modest about it, which I love, because you're clearly passionate about it. And I urge people to go and have a look at your website, which we'll give a mention to see the creations that you make, because this is serious for you. This is what you love doing. It's a passion.
Yeah, exactly like you said. It is a huge, huge passion of mine.
It's like every waking moment. He's got his sketchbooks morning, noon and night. Even if he gets a break, he doesn't want to go out anywhere. He'll sit glued to his sketchbooks. He's got sketches in his books literally to last him 10 years.
I think, Joanna, you know what I mean. That for a lot of people, they think of a teenager starting off something like that and see it as a bit of a gimmick, but it just really isn't.
It really isn't. He's been sketching since he was 4, and it's in his blood. It's his passion. That's it. He doesn't want to do anything else. I used to say, from the age of sort of 7 or 8, even though I could see where this was going, don't you want to become a barrister? Don't you want to be a lawyer? Don't you want to be a doctor? Do something that isn't kind of, I don't know, as flamboyant, and have something a little bit more stable, because the fashion industry is ever evolving and all that kind of stuff. But at least with a different profession, it's kind of a bit more stable, if that makes sense from a parent's point of view. But his heart is fashion. That's it.
Well, I can only speak as a kid who was 12 who wanted to be a journalist, who wanted to talk to people on the air, and I'm doing what I love doing. So I recognise within you this absolute draw and passion that you have for what you're doing, Josh. And I'm thinking, you've got so many years ahead of all this experience you're going to gain. So that must be really exciting to think, I wonder what next week will bring. I mean, this week alone has brought international attention to you.
Yeah, it's just been so much, really. And like you said, it is actually quite, not scary, but scary to kind of think what may lie ahead, really, because, of course, I am relatively young and I have got so many years ahead.
But maybe actually the great thing is not to overthink about the pressure. Just enjoy the moment, because I think you're naturally gifted at what you're doing. So you can embrace that, rather than what the rest of the world sometimes can do, which is to pressure kids into having to achieve a certain thing.
It's quite funny actually sometimes. I mean, he's obviously done 3 shows so far, and the last 2 at Icons. He's kind of shown the adults how it should be done with backstage dealings.
I'm not surprised.
Because sometimes it can kind of be a bit in your face. It can get a bit heated. It can get very stressed, because there's a lot to prepare. Josh just saunters in, does his thing, gets out, and that's it. It's just a breeze to him. He doesn't get stressed about anything.
Well, that's a good thing. And in terms of the next step for you then, Josh, this huge creation you're going to do, tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, well, of course, my next show will be during London Fashion Week in September, and I can't really reveal too much about it, but it will feature the most expensive dress ever done by a 13-year-old fashion designer.
Can you tell us a kind of price range?
It's got a lot of noughts on the end.
Very diplomatic, Mum.
Yes. Exactly.
Look, great seeing you. We can't wait to hear more about it. And what we'd love to do is maybe get you to make an audio diary during that time for this show so that we can follow your story, which I think will be brilliant.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's really lovely meeting you. Thank you so much for telling us about your love of fashion.
Oh, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Jana.
Thank you very much.
It's BBC Radio Kent, so remember that name. You're not going to miss it, to be honest. And I'll tell you the best way to find out about what Josh does is to go to his website, Designed by Josh. BBC Radio Kent is the Dominic King Show with Lewis Capaldi. And